Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me today. This is David Bianco. Today's audio excursion is going to take us into the 40th anniversary of the release of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Now, some of you may know I grew up in Gary, Indiana. Michael Jackson grew up in Indiana, and we literally lived just a couple of miles from each other. As a matter of fact, in 1968, I saw Michael and his brothers perform in a parking lot of a Sears store when they were showing off the car from Goldfinger. So you got an idea of how old I am. But they were nobody at the time. But of course, we know the story after that. So Thriller, 40 years ago. It's Michael's sixth studio album following the huge success of Off the Wall, the album that was produced with Quincy Jones. And the goal for Thriller, Quincy told his team after the success of Off the Wall, was to do something so good that people would want to spend their hard-earned money to go back and buy another Jackson album, Michael Jackson album. That's a really interesting way of putting it. The recording of the album took place from April to November of 1982 at Westlake Recording Studios in LA. There was a budget for this particular project of $750,000. That's $750,000 to us regular folk. A lot of money. It ended up being released after Thanksgiving on November 30th of 1982. So it had the opportunity to take advantage of the holiday season shot in the arm.
Come on down and see what we got for the Christmas season.
However, interestingly enough, it didn't take off like a rocket. It took 3 full months for Thriller to get to number one on Billboard. That was surprising to me. Well, it became Jackson's first number one album on the top charts, and it spent 37 non-consecutive weeks there from end of February 83 through mid-April 1984. And initially 32 million copies were sold worldwide by the end of 1983. And it was the best-selling LP in the U.S. at that time for 2 consecutive years, 83 and 84, and that was a first at the time. Now, I did a little bit of investigation on this because the recording and the mixing of this album is so well done. So who did it? Well, the really great Bruce Swedien, a gentleman who's now passed on in 2020, who recorded the likes of Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Oscar Peterson, Nat King Cole, Natalie Cole. He won 5 Grammys, nominated for 13. He was a guy who really said it's all about the music. Tended to wonder if he was our buddy Mazzy's spiritual father in that way. It's all about the music. He always told the students that he talked with that music is an acoustical event and should be treated that way. And he certainly proved it. Here's some audio excursion fun facts about the recording of Thriller. In the recording of Thriller, Bruce used in mixing 196 tracks. 196 total tracks. That is unbelievable.
You're kidding, right?
Michael Jackson, when he recorded the voice of any song, wanted to do it in the dark. And a lot of times they appease that. He was never late for any studio time, and he always had all of his lyrics memorized. Never once did he walk in with any written lines of music or lines of lyrics. He walked in and did it cold. He believed the emotion of a song comes out more clearly and naturally if you're not distracted with one of your senses having to read something else. So a lot of what you hear is really at gut level. What about the song Thriller? Well, did you know that the wolf howls on that are actually Michael Jackson? Now, they tried to get a dog named Max that they had seen in the Hounds of the Baskerville movie to do the howling, and they worked with him for a day, but Max did not want to be on record. So at the end of the day, Michael Jackson did those howls. And oh, by the way, in the Thriller song, he also did the steps that you hear in it.
Footsteps, footsteps, footsteps.
So pretty interesting, pretty interesting. Now, we all know that Eddie Van Halen was involved in the great guitar solo for Beat It, right? And what was going on there is, well, Eddie was the only guy who brought in his own recording person. Bruce did not do the recording of that. And Bruce tells the story that in the next studio where he was sitting, he went over before they were getting ready to start that. And as they started to jam up the guitar, he ran out of there so quick. He was so overtaken by how loud it was. He said he would never subject his hearing to that. So the plan for Eddie Van Halen to actually use another recorder, in this case it was Don Landy, to use him as a recorder was great because Bruce said he wouldn't do it. So just another interesting tidbit to the Thriller story. So it really is an album that has so much depth and so much activity in terms of a book actually being written about how it was recorded. I looked at pieces of that book and also watched a few videos. So if you really like to get into the architecture of how albums are built, then I suggest maybe you pick that one up. But you didn't come here just to hear the history of Thriller. We're here to do a comparison. And the comparison is between the new Mobile Fidelity 33 1/3 one step. And it's a 1 LP because it's 33 1/3. A lot of one steps have been 2 LP. There is rumor that down the road, MOFI will release it on a 2-disc 45 RPM, by the way. So that is $100. I have here to my left, I have the OG of Michael Jackson's Thriller. And we know it's an OG because he wasn't credited on the back cover, which later they released the cover with him being co-producer credited on the back. And I also have the Half-Speed Master by CBS. Back in the 80s, CBS got on the bandwagon of half-speed mastering, which was big with, at the time, MFSL, Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab. And a lot of times they released concurrently an album both in the original and in the half-speed master. Now, the original was $6.99 or $7.99, and then the half-speed master was like $12.99, so fairly cheap. Now, in the CBS methodology, there was a digital step right from the start. So just so we understand, that was the way they did it as opposed to Mobile Fidelity at the time. But it was unique to have a major label get on the bandwagon for an audiophile record. So, how did the shootout go, so to speak? Well, I listened to the Mobile Fidelity first. Obviously, with the vinyl that they used, Super Vinyl, it really was very quiet right from the get-go, right on the lead-in grooves. And that's great. That's always a good start because I, for one, don't like any surface noise at all. That's just something that distracts. Now, an album as powerful as this, as soon as the music starts, that's all you're going to hear, obviously. But it was very clean. So it seems to me that this is really an interesting situation. We've had reviews by other folks in the vinyl community, most particularly people like Michael 45 in Germany, who really thought they sucked the life out of this in the MOFI and kind of said, I'm done with MOFI. And we have Melinda Murphy, who is another great channel in the VC, who really enjoyed it, who really loves this album, knows it well and enjoyed it, and really thought it was great. And so I've read, and maybe you have read, and you have seen the videos of people reviewing this album, and it's kind of been all over the place. So my approach was to first listen to the MOFI, and I can tell you right out of the box that it was very nuanced, very precise. Things like the finger snaps in Billie Jean, very, very precise, for example. I mean, to the point of it being like, where'd that come from kind of a sound. So really what we have is sonic accuracy in this. That is really what we have. And this goes through most of the songs. Now, side 1 and side 2 kind of don't exactly have the same exact feel, it seems like to me. I noticed that just in some nuanced ways. But overall, if I was to say what are the characteristics of the MOFI, quiet, clean, accurate. But some of that takes away some of the integration of the sounds that you feel in the OG. So I put on the OG and I listened to it, and I recognized that some of the sounds that I heard nuanced out of the Mobile Fidelity that I really didn't recall nuanced in the OG, now I could hear, I could experience, I knew it was there. Now, whether that's partly muscle memory from me being able to now recognize that that is in fact present because the MOFI made it audibly visible or auditory, possibly that's the case because it's so fresh. But what you start to recognize is the OG for this was recorded so damn good. I mean, that is really the lesson in my mind of what has really come out of this. Okay. I just really feel like there wasn't as much difference to gain from moving this to a MOFI because the OG is so damn good. So what I started to think about is a term I'm going to call the opportunity factor. What is the opportunity in a recording to draw something out when it exists in an original source? How much more can you get out? And I want to give you a visual. I did a review not long ago of the new Steely Dan Can't Buy a Thrill. And what I would say about that is, although the recording was decent, I thought that the what was recorded was good, but it didn't come out well on vinyl. It just didn't have the full mature sound that was actually there. And so when in fact that was remastered and put to vinyl by Bernie Grundman, it's like having a wash rag, and when you wring it out, oh, there was a fair amount of water still in it, and you could wring it out and get more and get a little more, and Bernie just got all of that out of that Can't Buy a Thrill, and that really, there was just more there that was present and available, and he got it all out. So the delta between those, the difference between the original and in this case, it was the acoustic sound / analog productions version of the UHQR of Can't Buy a Thrill by Steely Dan is magnitudes more engaging and revealing and just go-to copy, absolutely, no doubt about it. In the case of Thriller, I feel like maybe either there wasn't as much water in the rag or we didn't have the person who originally mastered this do it, which really surprised me. I really didn't understand why Bernie Grundman wasn't involved in the mastering of a Thriller, in this case for Mobile Fidelity. That to me didn't make sense in a lot of ways. It didn't make sense just for the tradition of it and the respect of it. It really kind of, to me, just didn't quite click. So I don't know if Bernie had gotten a hold of it, had he been able to, with even more experience than he had back then, he would really been able to get as much. Was there really more water in that wash rag to wring out that maybe a younger mastering engineer couldn't get out or didn't see need to get out? I don't know what the cause is, but I do know what the effect is. And the effect is that when you listen to the differences between these two, the OG and the MOFI, and in fact, even the CBS Master Sound Half Speed Master, you really step back and say, there's not that much difference. The clarity in the OG is so intermeshed. I mean, some of the segregation that is present in the MOFI that you hear auditorily of different instruments, while very interesting, when that is there in the OG, that mix feels a little more intermeshed, that mastering. It's got a little more togetherness to it. And that creates a little more warmth in feel and danceability, and it has that a little bit more mojo, I guess I would call it. If you want to really hear and experience the depth of the amount of instruments used and the way it was recorded, the MOFI is a very interesting experience in that way. And it does have a decent beat to it. It isn't, I don't think, lacking as much bass as some have said. Is it quite as strong as the OG? No. But the reason is it's not as intermeshed as well with the mid-range and everything. Because it's separate more, it doesn't quite have that warm bass kind of feeling. It's more of, the bass is there, you can feel it, but it's distinct. And it's a matter of what sound you like. I'm not here to say one is bad or one is good. So in some ways, both the reviews that I mentioned, Melinda's and Michael 45, they're both right in their own context. It's not like they're inaccurate. So part of it is, what are you looking for? What do you want to hear? What do you want to do? I mean, for me, now what is my go-to version of this? If I want to get up and dance, or I want to get up and listen to this, I'm going to put on the OG because it just has that energy. Even with a little bit of surface noise there, it just has it. When I want to have a listening experience and really think about what Bruce Swedien was doing when he mixed these 196 tracks and the way he did what he did. For example, on Thriller, all of the intro at the beginning of that before the music starts, with the howling and the steps and all that, all of those are stereo tracks. If you go back and look to the mastering sheet when he recorded this, or the mixing sheet when he recorded this, each one of those are stereo in and of themselves. So it's on a 24 track, 12 tracks each, but a stereo. So you hear this effect in stereo. It's not like the howling's a mono and the steps are a mono. They're stereo and they have depth and imagery. And that is very obvious now when I start to listen to that. So there's a lot of intricacies that are there. So when David, the heady guy who wants to really listen to it analytically, the first four letters are anal. When I want to listen to it analytically, I'll pull out the MOFI. But when I just want to really experience it the way it was made and the way it's always been and the way it feels, I'm going to pull out the OG or the half-speed master. Either one, they're very close. I'd say the OG's a little better. The digital in there maybe had a little effect, maybe not quite as bassy in the half-speed master, but still pretty darn good, pretty darn close. So that really is kind of the difference. So for me, the MOFI educated me. It gave me an education on the instrumentation and an education on the way it was made and how it sounded in a more nuanced kind of way. And then for me, when I heard that in the OG, I could draw that out, and it had a sensibility about that being present. But that intermeshing of sounds really was much more of a feel that you had, for me, with the OG. The MOFI was close, but there still is a little bit of sterility that is going on with trying to make it clearer. And I think that's kind of where those differences lie. So it's not one is good, one is bad, I don't think. I think we're being educated through the listen that we get in the MOFI. It's like when you hear the original pieces of a multi-track and you hear the way things are made individually, and then you go, oh, I heard those vocals, those backing vocals separately, and now that I've heard those in a very distinct and isolated way, now they have a presence. They have a way of being understood and heard by me that maybe what I was hearing before was so focused in my foreground that now I can balance the foreground and the background, and those background backing vocals pull up a little bit, and I'm able to kind of bring them in and synergize them better with, let's say, either the instrumentation or the lead vocalist, whatever it might be. So our ears do get trained somewhat, and we learn those things. And now you hear the whole mix and you hear the whole environment of what's there, and you say, aha. So there's a lot there. It is really a matter of what sound do you like better. Now, you can get an OG for probably $30, one in decent shape. versus $100. And if you just want to dance and if you just want to enjoy what was intended, I'd say go get the OG. If you really want to hear the nuance that's there and you really want to peel the layers back and you would sit and read the book like by Bruce Swedien about making of Thriller, I could see where the MOFI really gives you that education, and it has gotten me to appreciate the OG even more, which is really an interesting outcome. So that's what I heard, and that's what I experienced. And I hope that, maybe this kind of takes a little bit of the blur out between these reviews and why some are one way and others are another. One special thing I'm going to do at the end of this video is to show you a timeline sequence of what happened with Thriller and some very key things when it was made. You might want to see the pictures and the dates on those, just as we do an outro to this video. I'm going to do that instead of my standard outro, just in total respect for the work that was done here, because this is craft at its best, no doubt about it. So if you like what you saw and heard today, please subscribe. If you press the subscribe button with the black bell there, the all, you're going to get notifications. And if you liked it, thumbs ups are always welcome. Comments, I'd like to hear what you might think. Did this help clear things up for you a bit? Because there was a lot of confusion in the review world about this album. And I was trying to reconcile it because I waited a few weeks to get mine and do this to kind of see what had come in. And I was really excited to try to figure out what the heck is going on. So again, I thank you as always for joining me here at Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. Take care, everybody.